Hey, so we just talked about how Lincoln was telling the country that it really cannot continue being half slave, half free. The country has to come together and agree on this or deal with this. And so, what we're going to be reading about on the next couple pages is how the country gets closer and closer to war, because that's really going to be how this is resolved. And so, what I want you to really just pay attention to in this lesson is what are the events that happen that can get us closer and closer to the Civil War, the important things that happen, and then you're going to create a timeline of those events. So pay attention to those. It starts at the top, at the edge of war. So again, we're getting very close. It says by 1859, many Americans feared that war would soon tear apart the nation. There seemed to be no way to avoid violence. John Brown's raid. For John Brown, there was no compromise on slavery. The fierce abolitionist had been a conductor on the Underground Railroad in New York. He was also involved in the violent events in Bleeding, Kansas. In 1859, Brown tried to start a revolt among enslaved people. He planned to attack an army arsenal in Harper's Ferry, Virginia. Brown then planned to give the weapons to enslaved people who believed would rise up against plantation owners. On October 16th, Brown and a small force captured the arsenal. Enslaved people nearby did not join or revolt against the slaveholders. 2 days later, U.S. soldiers commanded by Colonel Robert E. Lee recaptured the arsenal. Brown was convicted of treason or betraying one's country and hanged. His raid struck fear across the South. So John thought that if he got a bunch of weapons at an arsenal, which is an arsenal is a place that, holds weapons or stores weapons, and he gave them to the slaves, that they would revolt against their slaveholders. But that just didn't happen. And unfortunately, unfortunately, John was caught and put on trial and he was hanged. So that didn't really work out well for him. The next thing we're going to read about is the election of 1860. That is a very important election for the country. So it says, in the presidential election of 1860, Abraham Lincoln ran as a Republican candidate. Stephen Douglas ran as a Democrat. Two other candidates also joined the race. Only Lincoln took a stand against slavery in the new territories. Southern lawmakers warned that if Lincoln won, they would secede or withdraw from the Union. In November 1860, Lincoln was elected. Then in December, South Carolina was the first state to secede. By February, 6 more states had seceded. They established the Confederate States of America, also called the Confederacy, and elected Jefferson Davis as their president. First shots fired. In the spring of 1860, Confederate troops seized several U.S. Army arsenals in the South. Fort Sumter and Island Arsenal in the harbor of Charleston, South Carolina, refused to surrender. The commander asked the federal government for more supplies and weapons. Before supplies could arrive, Confederate guns fired at the fort on April 12, 1861. The Civil War had begun. And we talked about this before, but a civil war is a war among people who live in the same country. So a couple of important things that happen that you need to be aware of. When Lincoln is elected, the rest of the country that did not like slavery, that did want slavery, the South, they were like, oh no, he's against slavery and he's going to make our country basically end slavery. And so those states started what they call seceding. And seceding means to basically leave. We're not confusing that with succeeding. Secede as SECEDE. And once those states started seceding, they actually started a new country. Instead of the United States of America, they called themselves the Confederate States of America. They elected a president who was Jefferson Davis, and planned to be their own country. Of course, that wasn't going to fly. You can't just break the country in half and become your own country that simply. And so now we have some fighting that starts. All right. We have Confederates firing on Fort Sumter, which is an arsenal place again that they keep weapons. And now the Civil War has begun. So I look forward in the next lessons upcoming to talk more about what goes on during the Civil War. See you on Monday. Yay!